There is still hope, but it is quickly dwindling for the men's basketball team.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day, your second listen possibly if you're listening to this as a bonus episode on Friday afternoon. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. So check that out at FanDuel.com. Joe Tillery joining me to close out the weekend of Wildcat Chatter. You can find him at Joe Tillery on YouTube. He's very close. We're talking under 50 subscribers away from his 3,000 subscriber goal. So make sure you go ahead and check that in the episode description after this show. Subscribe and watch his great content. He just talks about everything under the sun when it comes to Wildcats, Chiefs, you name it. He's got it covered over there at Joe Tillery. Joe, we got to talk some men's basketball, some women's basketball on this show as we head into the weekend. And of course, it comes with a little bit of woes, right? Because we had this great feeling before this West Coast trip for the men's, where you had this great winning streak. You were winning against ranked West Virginia. You shut down a season sweep against Oklahoma State. You took care of Iowa State in Ames, like one of the biggest things to break the road losing streak. And then you continue that with Arizona State on the road. You beat ranked Kansas, which doesn't seem like a huge win anymore. And you take care of ranked Arizona. But after that, you had a 6-game winning streak. You were on cloud 9, thinking you came into consideration. Joe Lunardi had them in bracketology, just a few spots away from making the March Madness tournament. You go on to lose against a BYU team, which now eventually doesn't look like a huge or a bad loss, whatever. I think BYU might be one of the best teams not ranked in the top 25 in the nation. But the loss against Utah to finish it out in the West Coast trip was absolutely dreadful. Take me back to this West Coast trip. What went wrong, and where do you think this team sits right now heading into the weekend?
Well, I think I'm on record saying is I never want to play another game in the state of Utah ever again for any sport personally.
I'm with you, man. It's so tough to play there.
Yeah, I mean, Provo's insane. I mean, Utah, you should have beaten Utah. Utah is not a good basketball team. And that was lackluster energy from start to finish. Coleman Hawkins looked awful, though I do think his knees were kind of bothering him in that a little bit. It looked like he was hobbling, but man, just a wild 180 from what was to what is. And obviously, this isn't a situation where it's like, the walls aren't closing in, the tournament season isn't over. You still have to do some things, and we'll talk about that here in the stretch, but it's not to say that it's all done. This team isn't done. That being said, they have done both of the hyper extensive ways to make us all believe and all simultaneously say, no, this team's done in about a span of 3 weeks. And that's kind of a wild thing. That being said, they don't like making it easy on themselves. So naturally what we'll see in the next, 5 games is a 5-0 record, immediately lost in the Big 12 tournament. Like, it's just a confusing season for Kansas State. But yeah, the BYU game, I was kind of going into it. I still believed, obviously you're statistically the best team in basketball over the last 6, which is still crazy to think about. Going to that game, I was worried. I mean, BYU was surging, just beat Kansas, or excuse me, obviously looking back at it, they just blew out Kansas. But they've won some good games. They're in the tournament field on the positive side of the bubble, close to sneaking off the bubble in a positive way, but they're still a bubble team. Obviously playing in Utah is awful. Playing in Provo is impossible. And Kansas State just did not get started early. It's something that we've seen at times this season, but road games, they have looked a little bit lackluster. You saw it against Arizona State early. Iowa State's a different game. That's just a whole different thing. But it did feel like the guys are playing already at a disadvantage. And I don't know if that's a preparation thing, if it's a mentality thing. But the West Coast trip was not my favorite, to say the least.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm with you. I think we got to put a petition out to not play in Utah anymore. Brent Yormark, if you're listening, please. No, but I'm with you. Absolutely. The plus side of it is that 3 of the next 5 games of the final 5 games of the season are in Manhattan. The only 2 are on the East Coast. So, I mean, at least there's that. You're not going to Utah. You're actually getting far from it. But with that being said, 5 games to go, and you're currently sitting with a 13-13 record. Obviously not what you've expected, not what you wanted, but where you're at right now, and I've seen this stat get passed around a couple times, there's only been about 9 or 10 teams at large in the NCAA tournament history to make the tournament at 14 losses. So if it gets anything farther than that, you're in trouble. So with that being said, if you lose any one game for the rest of the way, that's your 14. You can't lose a game in the NCAA, the Big 12 tournament then, if you want to go past that 14 loss mark to go in there. I think obviously things could change. I think the resume for Kansas State with their quad one wins could look really good. Personally, I think this, and I think that we've seen it across social media all the time, which, by the way, if you've been looking for me on social media, my Twitter account has been locked out. I don't know what's going on with that. Elon is not answering back my call. I don't know. He must be busy or something. Locked On Kansas State now has a Twitter account. You can check that out. I'll leave that in the description below. We have a Locked On Kansas State. That's where you can find me from here on out moving forward. But what I've seen on social media is the constant question, Joe, of how many wins is it going to take for this team to make the tournament? Is it still possible? Is there still a chance for it to be happening? My thought process is you got to win the next 4 games. And if you don't win the next 4 games, it doesn't matter. I don't think the rest of it matters, unless obviously you win the Big 12 tournament and then you make an automatic lock. But if you want to be an at-large team, I think you have to win this weekend against Arizona State. I don't think you have to win by crazy amounts. You only won by 1 point last week. You just got to win. UCF, not a tournament team, but they just lost to Colorado, who Colorado just got their first Big 12 win. Guess what? You play them next. So the next 3 teams are nowhere near a tournament team come March. You have to win those next 3. Like, there is no way of losing those games, because that might be quad 3 or quad 4 losses with some of those when it's all said and done. At Cincinnati, we don't really play great at Cincinnati. That's been a thing that we've had trouble with in the past, but I think you have to prove that one, that you can still win on the road, because a road resume is huge. You're not going to be playing in Manhattan in the tournament, so you got to find a way to do that. I think the next 4 wins, the next 4 games, have to all be W's, Joe.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I mean, there's probably a way to say that they could figure out a way. Like, if you beat Iowa State again, it's another quad 1 win, and that'd be your 4th quad 1A win, which, breaking it down into quad 1A and B is kind of silly to me, but statistically speaking, the top 15 teams in the country fall into that, or top 15 teams in the net, whatever the case is. And no team has ever missed the NCAA tournament having 4 quad 1A wins. K-State's already got 3, which is kind of insane to think about. You beat Iowa State, you'd have your 4th, you'd be a lock for that situation. That being said, I think they could still find a way to do it, even if they beat Iowa State, like you say. I see it as you need to go 4-1 at least in the stretch. If you lose 2 games, I think it's done. You could lose to Iowa State and then win 2 games, get to 20 games, and you'd have a close argument, is the way I see it. If that overall win-loss record says 20 in the win column, you're going to be at least close, and then you pray for no bid stealers. A bid stealer, and you're probably looking at a tough spot in the tournament. But I do think the way I look at it here is a rational idea that I'm seeing is 4-1 down the stretch. And I think you, in theory, say you lose to Cincinnati on the road, that stinks, but they're not that far out of the tournament in terms of the bubble yet. Wouldn't be the worst loss. Plus, it's on the road. I get it. You could figure out a way to go 4-1 in the last 5, win at least 2 games in the Big 12 tournament and still get close or make it. It's just going to be about what it comes down to. So the way I see it, I think you just win out. That'd be a perfect situation. You win out, you make the tournament, you look good. That's perfect. But the reality is, I think you could figure it out at 4-1. Anything less than that, sayonara, pack it up.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, actually. The fact that you now making it where you got to win 2 in Kansas City instead of 1, because who knows, you might be facing like a team like Colorado your first game, and that's not going to push the needle. That's not going to do anything, right? So I think you do have to probably get 2 in Kansas City if you do make that 4-1 stretch. I think you're right there. Now, if they can go 5-0 and they can beat that Iowa State, I think we can go back to the conversation of them only having to win 1 in Kansas City. I think that's a fair assessment. And I think that is absolutely doable. I mean, the fact that you'd be able to sweep Iowa State, split against Kansas, I mean, that is now Kansas isn't a huge win anymore. I think it's still going to be seen as quad 1, probably a move to quad 1B or whatever the case may be with the net. But they were ranked 11th when we beat them. That's pretty cool. So I know it doesn't act like that, but still keep that in mind. Overall, though, it's frustrating that we have to continue talking about this, because this team is so much better than being a bubble team or an off a bubble team. And we've seen that over the last 6 games before the West Coast trip. We've seen that. We've seen what they can be capable of. We've seen Doug McDaniel take a next step up in his game. Jerome Tank's talked about how he has so many other levels in his game, and it looks like he's taking that next level to the next step. And no longer are we questioning, should he be the point guard of the future for this program? We're knowing that he needs to be the point guard of the future for this program. Coleman Hawkins hasn't had the best couple games in the past, but when they were winning on that nice winning streak, with the exception of the Arizona game, he was doing great things. David Gasson was absolutely incredible. You're getting some great things from Moby, who you just had an interview with on your channel, by the way. And you've had some really good things from just overall this entire team. Max Jones, CJ Jones, what they've done has been incredible. And of course, the Amarillo assassin, Hassan, is just unbelievable. I mean, he shoots it from everywhere with his eyes closed, and he drains it. Going into this Arizona State game, as I continue to ramble here, and I'm not trying to do so, but this team kind of makes me feel I'm trying my hardest not to be irrational, because it's tough. Like, as a fan, you want to like watch this team succeed, and then they find a way to lose these games, and it's just unfortunate and it's frustrating. But going into this Arizona State game, they haven't won a game since they've played Kansas State in the beginning of February. They just came off a loss against Houston. Now, I will say this. They scored 65 points against Houston. Houston hasn't allowed that many points in a very, very long time. Now, that's a moral victory for the Sun Devils, and I hope that's as far as it can go and the closest you get for a victory come this weekend. Kansas State has to have a statement win against the Sun Devils this Sunday. And, I mean, although I think you just have to win, does it matter if they win by 1 or by 15? Or does that truly matter to start off, not for resume purposes, but to fire this team back up for the final stretch?
You know, it depends, because you could have a really hard fought win where both teams play great and win by 3 or 4 and feel great, or you could just blow them out wire to wire, which we've seen multiple times in Manhattan the last couple weeks. It's clear to me this team needs to be at home. They need to be at home for a little bit. And I think that'll help Coleman Hawkins. I think it'll help David Gasson. The 3 dudes that have been pretty consistent regardless has been Brendan Hassan, Max Jones, Doug McDaniel. Those 3 have been really solid the last stretch. Even in the 2 losses, they were pretty dang good. I feel like this team needs a homecoming, a literal homecoming, where they come back home, they look great, they show out. They don't have to put up 100 points to feel good about it. I do think that they just need to win to get that confidence back, but it can't be like this cruddy win. Like, if you beat Utah last week, obviously it's a road win. Nobody, even if you see a K-State win in the final stat sheet, nobody says, wow, that was a great game. Really happy I watched that. Feel really good about where we're headed. That's still a concerning, like, man, we did not look good. Thank goodness we got out of there. Hopefully it doesn't linger. There's wins and losses that make you feel good, even if they're flipped. This team, I just feel like overall needs to come back home, realize who they are, because I can sit here and say they're going to look good. They'll go 5-0. I can sit here and say they're going to go 0-5. This team has left nobody with the opinion of, like, what is there to be expected? Because you've literally been the best team in basketball. You've also been one of the worst teams in basketball in a span of a couple weeks. So it's like, who's going to show up? Who's ready to go? And it's just the question of, this might be a looking forward thing, but we're looking at this season now where it's either, okay, we're looking forward to keeping multiple pieces, hope we hit the portal hard next year, we'll get back to the tournament. Or you're looking at the spot where it's, these dudes are ready to play for Kansas State. They want to play Kansas State basketball and show out for this home crowd. And it's kind of at the exact fork in the road of, this is going to be answered against Arizona State on Saturday, or on Sunday.
Huge gut punch. You're absolutely right. I hope it's the second option that comes and shows up on Sunday. I'll get your actual prediction for this game in just a second as we wrap up the show. But first, I want to head over to the women's team, because there's some good news coming out for a game that's happening on Saturday. They got a quick turnaround on Monday. Let's talk about the women's squad right here on Locked On Kansas State. This show is sponsored by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get it on than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off and want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets in a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3. I never feel like I'm missing a chance. Plus, the app is so easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment count with FanDuel, the official partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Hey, for your second listen of the day, check out Locked On Big 12. Drake Toll and the rest of the Big 12 squad have you covered. And also check out Joe Tillery right there at Joe Tillery. Find him on YouTube. Very close to 3,000 subscribers. Get him there. He's going to put a Kansas State tattoo on his leg, folks. Just for getting to 3,000 subscribers. You can be a part of that. So check it out over on YouTube. Okay, we're going to talk about these women's squad right now because unfortunately, it was a bad weekend for basketball for Kansas State. The women's squad had their own bit of woes, losing to 17th ranked West Virginia, 70-57. And I don't know if I want to say it was all bad for Kansas State. Now, obviously, they lost the game. They didn't play great, but West Virginia was just really, really good. They played really good basketball. And unfortunately, that one went south for the Wildcats. They are in a spot right now where they need to win out and then get at least one more loss from TCU in order to end the regular season on top in the Big 12. That's a tough ask because TCU is a really good basketball team. We've all seen that. You did beat TCU. TCU has a tough schedule the rest of the way, though, as well. I'm pretty sure they finished off their season with a couple tough opponents. Let me look at it right now real quick. Yeah, they do play West Virginia. They do play Houston, and they do play Baylor. So they play a couple of the same opponents that Kansas State has over the next couple games. Heading into Saturday, though, the women's does take on Kansas in Manhattan for another Sunflower Showdown. This one worked out really well last time they faced off. They won 91-64. It is an opportunity. It sounds like we're going to get Ayoka Lee back for senior night on Saturday. Now, this isn't the final home game of the year, but they're making senior night against Kansas. I'm guessing it's because it's a weekend. They want to be able to make sure they get the best opportunity for these girls to show out for and get the acknowledgement they deserve. I've seen that general admission tickets are already sold out, which is fantastic. Love to see it. But this Saturday against Kansas, they have to make a huge statement to get back in the win column and continue their run to be one of those potential top 16 seeds in the tournament come March, Joe.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I mean, this team has had back-to-back, ego-checking losses. These are things that you sit there and say, man, maybe we weren't as good as we thought we were. I don't want to jump into that conversation because I don't think we are. I don't think we're bad. I think we're a good basketball team that, genuinely this season has been kind of a lingering season for everybody. You deal with injuries, you deal with things, you have to figure it out game to game, but this team's had enough time to adjust without Ayoka Lee. I'm not going to chalk it up to that. This game is against your rival. It's in Manhattan. It's senior night. This is going to be a massive game. Sold out already. It feels like one where I don't worry about the Cats looking lackluster. They feel like a team ready to get over that hump. Even if we only get Yoki for 12 minutes, let's be honest, she might not play, double-digit minutes, maybe more than 13 on senior night. But it does feel like Kansas State's ready, and I think you need TCU to drop a game down the stretch if you want to go win the Big 12, which is tough. I do think West Virginia's playing some of the best basketball in the conference. Their head coach is a genius. I'm not going to try to dispute what they did last week, but Kansas State needs this. They need a little bit of a get back to say, okay, we're who we thought we are. You want to go into March playing your best basketball, not the inverse, playing your best basketball in November or December. This team seems to have that type of maturity, but it's just putting it into practice. I do feel like we see big games from some of the girls that have stepped up a couple of times this year, but Jalen Glenn's looked good. Against Kansas, she went, crazy. Obviously, you've got Serena Sundell, who's an All-America type player, but we'll just have to see. I feel good about the game. I feel comfortable, and I just want them to take care of business in a game that really comes in kind of a bad spot for the Wildcats. I know it's, one where you've put all this stock into, so it's not going to be they're not going to get up for this game. But coming off a tough loss, then you play a top 25 team against Baylor in a week after. It's a bad spot, but I think the Cats will get it done.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think you mentioned it. I think the best case scenario would only be able to see 10 or 12 minutes from Ayoka Lee, meaning they didn't need her to go that far and they can slowly move her and get her ready for Monday's matchup because it's a quick turnaround. And she hasn't played for a very long time. She hasn't played since the Colorado game or the Arizona State game. The one of those two, I can't remember which one she got hurt in. I think it was the Arizona State game where she got hurt. But she hasn't played in quite some time, and she's coming back sooner than expected. So getting it a chance to slowly go into this and only get a couple minutes would be huge and probably be the best case scenario. So you can be able to and afford to play her the full game on Monday when you need her most against Baylor. Baylor is a very good basketball team. There's a reason they're ranked 19th. The Big 12 for women's basketball conference is very good this year. They are very good. And not a lot of people are talking about that. And I think that is a damn shame if you ask me. But they have only 3 games left and 2 of them come in the next couple days with Kansas and with Baylor. And if you want to be one of those top 16 seeds, you got to find a way to most likely win both of those. I think you probably got to win out to probably finish as a top 16 seed, because although there isn't really a truly number one team this year, you don't know if it's USC or UCLA. I just saw recent power rankings come out and they gave it to Notre Dame as well. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's a good sign for women's sports with the parity and all the stuff that's happened over the last couple seasons in women's basketball. It's not the fact where you only have 4 teams like it was, like it felt like 5 or 6 years ago, where you already knew 4 teams were going to be the final 4 teams. That's what it felt like a couple years ago. It is not that anymore whatsoever. And that is a great problem to have. If you can find a way to win out and get yourself potentially on the 2 line, maybe high 3, but even potentially on the 2 line, I think Kansas State has a really good shot at running the table in this tournament, Joe.
I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, they're a good basketball team. Yoki will be a question. You know, it'll be interesting to see what type of production you get from her in the last couple games. But you're getting her back early enough that she can get her feet wet a little bit before the tournament and start to get back to maybe not her peak self, but if she can get to 85% of herself in this span, that'll be massive for the team. And the girls around her have already learned to win without her. Adding her back in feels like it's only going to make the whole ship rise. So a good thing all around, but I do think you're right. If they can get to that spot, they've got the build, they've got the maturity, they've got the right people on that sideline to get it done. So it wouldn't surprise me to see this team make a deep run in March.
Can't agree with you more. All right, let's get the predictions for the games this weekend for Kansas State. Let's do that to finish up this show right here on Locked On Kansas State. All right, let's put a bow on this one right here on Locked On Kansas State, right here with Joe Tillery. You can find Joe Tillery at Joe Tillery on YouTube. Look at me saying Joe Tillery. I feel like if I say it 3 times in the mirror with the lights off, something's going to pop up behind me. I probably shouldn't do that. Maybe it'll be a tattoo on my leg. Maybe
it might be. You'll wake up.
Because he is so close to getting a tattoo on his leg for 3,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. Do him a favor. Check out his page. Lots of good stuff over there. And we're going to talk the predictions here. We just talked about this, both these teams, men's and the women's squad. Let's finish it up strong. Let's go to the men's, back over to them. And this is a huge game, a statement game that must happen against Arizona State. You only won 71-70 on the road last time you faced them. It was a wild ending, if you remember. Now you're back in Manhattan. It's a different feel. It's been a completely different feel playing basketball in Manhattan all season long, no matter who you play. What are you taking right now? We all know it's a must-win game. Can Kansas State get it done? And go ahead and give me, maybe we can get to a score prediction as well. What's your thoughts?
I've got the Cats winning this one. I feel like they're going to get to a point where they hit a first couple buckets, and then collectively they hear the crowd and they all immediately go, oh, right, that's what that feels like. And everybody just kind of exhales a little bit, and it gets that like tightness out of them a little bit. Give me the Cats 80, Arizona State 67. Commanding little win, 13-point win. I'm happy with that.
I would love that. I'm going to add more to it. I'm with you. I think Kansas State wins this game as well. I like that score prediction. My little score portion is going to be in the first 4 minutes, because I think that is a huge portion of the game for Kansas State. In the first 4 minutes, they are up 12-4. They have a 12-4 run to start the game. How about that?
Love it.
That'd be huge.
Love it.
Absolutely huge from that. All right, let's switch over to the women's squad. Let's talk about 2 games, because we have a quick turnaround for the women's squad. Obviously, start off with Kansas. They got a tough one on Saturday. Although they won by almost 30 points last time in Lawrence, this is still a rivalry game. We have to keep that in mind. This isn't something that you have to look over, although they have a ranked opponent coming in just a few days. Ayoka Lee returns to the court. From what we have heard, nothing is personally confirmed yet, but what we have heard, Ayoka Lee is going to return this weekend. What do you have for the Wildcats against the Jayhawks on Saturday?
I think the emotions are just going to be so high for Kansas State. And I know sometimes people can get a little nervous and a little chippy with that. I don't think the girls look at it that way. I think they're going to go out there to compete. Yoki's going to be amped up to an 11. She's going to be ready to go on senior night. Even if it's not her on the basketball court, the team's going to want to win for her. I mean, that's awesome. That's what you want to see. I got the Cats winning by a little bit more, not more than 30 per se, but I think I'm going to take the Cats 84, Kansas about 63. I feel like they're really going to lay it on them thick. They beat them up in Lawrence. They seem to figure it out. Samaya Nichols, I know, has been pretty good for Kansas, so it'll be an interesting task, but I feel good about the Cats.
I'm interested to see how Jeff Mittie is going to bring this squad out after this loss against West Virginia, because they all know the type of team that they are capable of being. It is fair. It is very fair that they all know who they can be and what they can be when the season's over. They can be hanging not only Ayoka Lee's number in the rafters, which obviously will happen, but they could be hanging a national championship banner. I want to see what Jeff Mittie is going to do with this squad, and I think that we are going to see an absolute statement win from the Wildcats against the Jayhawks. I'm thinking it's going to be even worse than it was in Lawrence. I'm going 93-59. I think it's going to be an absolute dagger of a win for the Wildcats because I think that they are going to be on a statement win. I think it's going to be huge. I think we're going to see some of the younger players step up and make some shots. And I have a weird feeling that they're going to be in a different type of mode, if you will, almost like they're already ready for the tournament. I think we are going to maybe step back, and I hope I'm right, and hopefully we can step back and say that loss against West Virginia might be the best thing that has ever happened to this team because it turned on a switch, and I'm hoping that starts on Saturday against Kansas. On Monday, hopefully that momentum continues as they take on 19th ranked Baylor. That game is going to be on ESPN2, by the way, 6 o'clock tip-off. That one's going to be such an interesting game. It should be a really good one. I think the momentum continues. I think, spoiler alert, I think Kansas State wins out. But my thought process here is they take care of Baylor. Baylor's been a tough team the last couple games. There's no doubt about that. They have won their last, I don't even know how many, but they won against Colorado, a team that Kansas State lost to by over 20-something points. They won 84-62. I don't think that's going to matter, though, in Manhattan. I think the Wildcats take care of business. I think they win this one. I think it'll be a little less scoring-wise, though. Give me 76-66. I think they take care of Baylor by almost 10 points. So actually 10 points in that case. What about you?
I like it. I'm right around that same neighborhood. I've got the Cats. I think it's going to be a closer game, but I've got the Cats about 72-65. So a 7-point win, but not a bad 7-point win, if that makes it sense. Like one that feels like less of a close game than 7 points.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Joe, where can everyone find you and what you got coming up?
YouTube, Joe Tillery. That's my name, first name, last name. Twitter on social media, you can find me Tillery_Joe. Just kind of hanging out, covering, talking about the Cats, doing whatever I can to get through this offseason together. The grind for sure, but I'm enjoying it. Hoping to see the Cats figure it out and get to the big dance here for K-State men's basketball and see the ladies hoist a national championship trophy. So that's what I got going on, and I'm excited always to be here with you, man.
Love it, man. And you can find that stuff in the show notes below as well. You can see him on Fridays with me here on Locked On Kansas State. We will be back on Sunday evening. I won't be on Saturday. They're doing this weird power outage thing in my neighborhood, so I don't have any power on Saturday, so I'll be watching the game elsewhere. So I won't be doing a women's post game on Saturday, but we'll be back on Sunday after the men's game. Jeff Burkhart and I will be doing the live post game, so check that out right here on Locked On Kansas State. Please like the video. Please subscribe. This has been Locked On Kansas State.